Happy Monday, folks, and welcome back to WWE Network and Chill here today. I'm Graham GSM Matthews, and every single Monday right here on the show, I break down all the original content that I watch on the WWE Network. Today we're talking Bring It to the Table Season 1, Episode 4, aired 2 weeks ago on the network right after Raw. Not a great show. Not a great show. It's better than the premiere. That's pretty much to be expected. I thought the pilot episode sucked, but the last 3 shows have been a lot better, just albeit not great. This was not quite as good as the other 3. There were just some comments made by JBL, surprise, surprise, that kind of rubbed some people, the wrong way, so we'll talk about that as we get to it. They kick off, though, in interesting fashion. The way that WWE promotes this show is that they're going to piss people off no matter what. And they're talking about the fans, which is going to entice you to watch, obviously. And that's how they branded the show. And they do that by starting out the show by taking a subtle jab at Mauro Ranallo. They go around the horn. They talk about, Rosenberg says, I'm sorry I made comments, or I made a controversial comment about Roman Reigns in one of the previous episodes. Corey Graves says, I made a controversial comment about so-and-so in the previous episode. And then JBL is supposed to say, I made a controversial comment about Mauro Ranallo, but he's like, I just won $20 last week on a bet or whatever. So obviously they're poking fun at that, which is fucking stupid. Like, move on. Let him just be. I know you paid him off or whatever. Just let it be. They talk about AJ Styles talking smack comments from a few weeks ago when he said, SmackDown makes them, Raw takes them, which I completely agree. And they all agree that SmackDown is the better show between the two. And that was the case, over a decade ago. JBL said that was the case well over a decade ago, back in 2004 to 2006. And that was SmackDown was the better show even then. And Graves said SmackDown is more of a wrestling show. And then Raw is more like storyline based and progression of angles and stuff like that, more talking, which is true. So again, that's kind of been the case pretty much forever, but he is right in saying that. They talk about the House of Horrors match from the Payback pay-per-view a few weeks back. JBL thought that it worked, though the live crowd did not seem to enjoy it, which again is absolutely true, and I completely agree. There's been a lot of polarizing opinions on it. I know a lot of you guys did not like it. I personally thought it was okay. I'm not saying it was the greatest match of all time, but I didn't think it was shit. It could have been way worse. Knowing WWE and how they book matches, this could have been just absolute garbage. And it wasn't. I thought it was okay, but JBL thought the same thing. So, among the many things that JBL will say in this show that you disagree with, I thought this was okay. I thought he was perfectly in the right in saying that. It worked, but it was not exactly for the live crowd. It may have worked on an episode of Raw, maybe not necessarily on a pay-per-view, though. They talk about the Superstar shakeup, who won between the two. Rosenberg says he did not like the layout of it, which, again, I agree with. I thought the layout with people just randomly showing up whenever they wanted, like, he's on Raw now, that's cool, was kind of underwhelming. But the Superstar shakeup itself, in terms of who went where, I thought was very well done. Corey Graves says that he hates Charlotte on SmackDown, which of course is all tongue-in-cheek, it's all character, because he loves Charlotte, but he does get Alexa Bliss in return, he does say that. JBL says that he liked it, and that he praises Kevin Owens as being one of the top heels, and SmackDown will greatly benefit from having him on their roster. They talk about the Welcoming Committee, the new stable, for the awful name for the new stable of Natalya, Carmella, and Tamina. Again, JBL says that he loves it. He thinks that it's great, they have more factions and shit. Again, I disagree, just because I don't think we need more factions. I think we need more individual-based storylines in the women's division on both shows. More so SmackDown. I think Raw is doing a better job of that right now. But Graves says it's really a thrown-together group of women. Again, that is what I agree with. It really does feel like just a thrown-together group of women, just as Corey Graves said, just because there's really no rhyme or reason for why they're together. I don't know, there's just no chemistry there. There are just 3 disgruntled women that don't agree with the direction of the SmackDown Live women's division, so they were just put together. No chemistry there, no nothing. At least like, Team PCB and, the Team Bad a few years ago, they all had chemistry. This group, for as much as they hated those faction wars, this is even worse, because the Welcome Committee has 0 chemistry whatsoever. Then they talk about the Titus brand, and these are the comments that I also agree with. Corey Graves says he praises Titus O'Neil, and then JBL also says, or he hates on it. He says that it's too big, he's too big to be manager, it's not going to work. Not sure if I exactly agree with that. I see the point that he's trying to make, that he was saying like, he's too big, the focus will be on him and not his associate, whatever. It depends on who he's with. I'm not the biggest O'Neil fan, at least as a wrestler, but Corey Graves says that, where he kind of lacks in the ring, he makes more than makes up for on the mic. And even Rosenberg brought up the fact that Titus kind of turned some heads when he was on commentary a few years ago. It's not really a few years ago at this point. It's more like 5 years ago. But he's right. I think O'Neal is way better off in a managerial role than he ever would be, in the ring. He just sucks in the ring. He's not going to get any better. If anything, he's going to get worse. So I do agree with Corey. JBL, I see the point he's trying to make in saying, oh, he's too big. You'll be the focus. He's not going to lend anything as a manager. I see the point he's trying to make, but I disagree. I think O'Neal is just way better off in the role, and I think he would be, I don't know about Apollo Crews being the right guy for him to represent, but even if it is, Crews is just as big as Titus is, so it's not a big deal. It's not like he's managing friggin', James Ellsworth or something. In that case, I would agree. Roman Reigns and Strowman. Roman Reigns and Braun Strowman, they talk about their feud. Graves says that he has enjoyed the feud. It's been one of his favorite feuds on WWE TV in some time. JBL says fans are hating him for the wrong reason, that being Roman Reigns. They've talked about Roman before. I'm not going to really echo their thoughts again. But I'm with Corey here. I mean, JBL is also right too. We're kind of hating Roman for the wrong reasons. It's not really his fault. It's really what he's being given to say and to do. He just comes off like an unlikable dick. He just doesn't come off well at all, really, in all of his segments and matches and shit. He's very good at being a performer. He's a great performer. He's just not a great character right now. So he's right. People are just not liking him for the wrong reasons, which, again, I agree with. What Corey said, though, about the feud itself, I've enjoyed the feud. I mean, it's kind of in a weird spot right now because they can't really do anything with it, with Braun Strowman being out hurt. But I think the feud has well exceeded my expectations. I thought it'd be a decent feud, not a great feud, and it's been a great feud so far, in my opinion. They talk about Shinsuke Nakamura's in-ring debut. Rosenberg is annoyed with the fact they're holding off until the Backlash pay-per-view. JBL, for once, makes a great point when he says it's worth the wait. It is absolutely worth the wait. You got to keep him special. Corey Graves points out how a fraction of the audience knows what NXT is, that they watch the product, which is true. I think everyone assumes that just because you're on the main roster, they followed you through NXT. That might be true for like 15, maybe 20% of the audience. Everyone else is purely casual fan. They may only watch Raw and SmackDown or SmackDown, but no NXT. Even if they have the network, does not necessarily mean they're watching NXT on a weekly basis. So he's right. People may not know who Nakamura is. Keeping him special will ensure that he's a bigger deal once he eventually wrestles in the ring come Backlash. So again, I agree with him on that. Not so much Rosenberg. They talk about Sheamus' comments in regards to the Attitude Era, how it doesn't come close to the current era in terms of wrestling and whatnot. And you guys know my thoughts on the Attitude Era, so I thought this was an interesting topic. JBL disagrees that the Attitude Era is certainly superior, but he says right now is an evolutionary period in terms of talent. Like, we don't really exactly have that Stone Cold, the next Rock right now. But there was also a time before Stone Cold and The Rock and The Undertaker, maybe not The Undertaker, but before those guys kind of came in, that we had a period where we had Rock and Stone Cold in 95, and the product sucked back then, but we had them, or maybe 96, because I know Rock didn't debut until 96, but they weren't the stars that they were today. Like, that's what he means by evolutionary period, and them being smaller stars, and eventually at some point we will get to that point where we have the next Rock, the next Stone Cold. So he's not pooping on the current era, but he's just saying that at some point we will get that next big star, and that they're in the company right now. Who that might be, they didn't say. But I do agree with what they're saying, that in terms of star power, yes, the Attitude Era is certainly superior. In terms of wrestling, obviously today is certainly superior in that respect. But yeah, it's not booming the business, so to speak. It's not the same wrestling boom that we had in the 80s or in the late 90s. It's a great time to be a fan, but it's just not in terms of making new stars. They're still in the process of doing that and finding that next breakout star. They talk about Rusev and his opinion on the Indies. I think he congratulated Alexa Bliss in a tweet on becoming, I don't know if it was either becoming number one contender or winning the championship. I think it was winning the championship. And he said, congrats to Alexa Bliss for winning the belt. You didn't have to spend 10 years on the Indies or whatever. And, Corey Graves says that there would have been at some point, there would have been some point, where he would have been offended being an indie wrestler. But he also says, as he said with the previous, question. There's a wealth of talent right now in the WWE, and he tells a story about Baron Corbin and the fact that and when he arrived in FCW, no one really liked him because he came in from football, but Baron Corbin eventually evolved into a great performer. And he doesn't exactly come from the independent scene. Mojo Rawley is the same way. Mojo Rawley isn't great, but he's getting better. And there's a few others too that came from outside of wrestling. Roman Reigns' family was in the wrestling business, but Roman wasn't working the indies before he came to the WWE. Neither was Braun Strowman. Neither was Alexa Bliss, and they're all stars in the current roster. So I do agree with that in that respect as well, where you don't have to be from the indie scene to be a star in today's WWE. It certainly helps in having the background or previous whatever, but they do well with what they have. They also talk about, or JBL makes the quote in saying, if you don't make it to the major leagues, you won't be considered the best in the world. Which I do disagree with. You may not be recognized as the best in the world, but that doesn't mean you're not the best in the world if you're not in the WWE. I mean, you look at Jay Lethal. You look at Okada. You look at guys like that. AJ Styles, before he came to the WWE, was already the best in the world before he came here. Now, in being here, it's already further solidified that as a fact. But those guys would do very well in WWE. It's not that they wouldn't do well here in WWE. It's that either they don't want to be in WWE, or they have no interest, or there's just no interest or no place for them on the show right now. That doesn't mean they're not the best in the world, So I have to disagree with JBL in that respect. I mean, I know what he's saying. Like, you'll never get John Cena levels of famous until you're in the WWE, but that doesn't mean you're not the best in the world. Jay Lethal, in my opinion, is if not the greatest professional wrestler in the world today. But he's never been in WWE, so it doesn't, that doesn't make that much of a difference. And maybe at some point he will be. I guess we'll find out in due time. They talk about, for a brief second, JBL getting hot at Rosenberg for selling his Undertaker shoes, presumably on eBay. Who the hell could possibly care? They talk about Kane in politics. JBL says that he's going in for the right reason, which is good. And I'm very happy for Kane. They do make note of his slogan, lighting the way for the future, and the little fire logo, whatever, which was pretty funny, the symbol. Corey Graves talks about Kevin Owens' dad supporting Sami Zayn on Twitter, which was funny. It turned into a negative when JBL starts bashing Sami, which is his heel shtick, whatever. But then he says, I'd rather have dinner with ISIS than Sami Zayn, which is such a dumb thing to say. But it doesn't surprise me that would come out of JBL's mouth, but whatever. They talk about Luke Harper having a shirt in WWE Shop, which is not true, but they joke about that. They talk about the crowd singing Shinsuke Nakamura's theme song outside of the arena post-WrestleMania on the SmackDown After Mania in Orlando. They talk about Vince McMahon. This is just miscellaneous topics at this point. They talk about Vince McMahon calling John Cena the Babe Ruth of the WWE, which is funny because they called Hulk Hogan the same thing, which they did not mention on Twitter about, I don't know how much earlier, maybe a year earlier, a few years earlier, I don't remember. But I'm sure Vince didn't slight Hogan. It was just, and Hogan is the Babe Ruth of WWE. I would definitely say that. But, I don't think Vince even remembered the fact that he had called, I don't even think it's him, when they called John Cena, or rather Hulk Hogan, the Babe Ruth, and he called John Cena the same thing a while later. Like, who cares? They talk about the Intercontinental Championship being on Raw. Graves discusses the importance of the level of stars going after that title on Raw, from Seth Rollins to Finn Balor to The Miz and all these other former and future world champions, which is true. The IC Championship, from a storyline standpoint, in the absence of Brock Lesnar and the Universal title, is the top title on Monday Night Raw right now. It doesn't exactly feel like it quite yet. I know The Miz and Ambrose have closed out the last few episodes of Raw, so it does to an extent, and the IC title has been kind of damaged for the past couple of months with Ambrose. It's not to the point where it doesn't mean anything, but it doesn't exactly scream top title right now. And now that they're quickly trying to make us believe it is the top championship with Brock Lesnar not being around, which is true. But anyway, I do agree. I mean, the IC title, I talked about it. It can be. It is now the top title on Raw from a storyline standpoint, but they can also solidify it as the prestigious championship that Raw needs at the moment, in booking it right and putting the belt back on The Miz, which I think he should, and they probably will. By the time I'm recording this before Raw last week, so I don't know who won that match. But at some point, JBL's, it could be back to that level where it was at a year ago, or maybe it was 2 decades ago, who knows. JBL says he's happy to see it back in prominence, which is true. I mean, Miz did just an exceptional job of that championship when he was champion. about a year ago. And now, Dean was doing the same thing, and he's kind of continuing the momentum to an extent. Now, The Miz is kind of back in the mix as well. So, I got to agree. It's great to see the IC Championship for the first time in my not many years of watching, but in the last 9 years at least. They're doing a good job of making it feel important again, which is awesome. And the last thing they talk about is Jinder Mahal becoming the new number one contender to the WWE Championship. JBL says he's pulling for him to win the title at Backlash. Graves says it's more of a wait-and-see approach, which, again, I agree with. Not a Jinder Mahal fan in the slightest, but at least they're trying to make new stars. When it comes to whether it's going to work, like Corey said, it's a wait-and-see approach. They're not going to know today. They're not going to know tomorrow. They're not going to know, whenever. They're going to find out months down the road whether it worked or not, as with him being a main event talent. So, yeah, I agree with Corey here that it's more, I can't say I'm pulling for him to be that top guy on SmackDown, but we will find out in due time whether this little experiment of WWE's will end up paying off with whether they're pushing him the right way and he's getting the right amount of spotlight and the right push, whatever. So we'll see. I do agree with that. We will see. So that does it for Bring It to the Table, Episode 4, Season 1. Again, aired on the network about 2 weeks ago. Check it out when you can. I know last week they aired the Finn Balor WWE 24 special, so by the time this goes up, I will have had a chance to watch that. Maybe next week we'll talk about it right here on WWE Network and Chill. But in the meantime and in between time, you guys can like the video, you can share the video, drop a comment, subscribe to the channel. Above all else, I appreciate you guys helping me break the 1,200 mark for subscribers. Awesome milestone, so I appreciate that. Find me on the Twitter machine at WrestleRant. Find me on Facebook at facebook.com/Graham.Jason.Matthews, obviously. All the links are down below in the description box, along with nextairwrestling.net for full written reviews and WrestleRant radio episodes, full written reviews of Raw, SmackDown, NXT, Impact, Ring of Honor, Lucha, and all this when that comes back soon, and all that good stuff. So that being said, guys, have an awesome rest of your week. We'll be back next Monday with another all-new episode of WWE Network and Chill, and I'll catch you guys then. So, Graham G.S. Matthews here, and I'll catch your ass down the road.